CBS Television City, Los Angeles, California. Ed Sullivan Theater, September 9th, 1956. Sunday evening, 7:55 p.m. The atmosphere inside CBS Television City is electric with tension that has nothing to do with the usual pre-show nerves. This is the second of 3 scheduled appearances by Elvis Presley on The Ed Sullivan Show, the most watched variety program in American television, and tonight will mark one of the most controversial moments in broadcasting history. Not because of what America will see, but because of what America will not be allowed to see. In the control room, Ed Sullivan paces behind the director's chair, his face showing the strain of a man caught between competing forces that threaten to tear his show apart. At 55, Sullivan has built his career on providing safe, family-friendly entertainment that brings American families together around their television sets every Sunday evening. The Ed Sullivan Show is appointment television, the cultural glue that binds Middle America together in shared experience. But Elvis Presley threatens everything Sullivan has built. The young singer's first appearance on September 9th drew 82.6% of the viewing audience, 60 million Americans, the largest television audience in history to that point. But those record-breaking ratings came with a price: thousands of angry letters from parents, threats from religious groups, and pressure from CBS executives who are terrified of losing sponsors. The letters have been pouring into CBS headquarters for 3 weeks. Elvis Presley is a disgrace to American youth, writes Mrs. Dorothy Henderson from Cleveland, Ohio. His gyrations are obscene and should not be broadcast into American homes. Similar sentiments arrive from parents across the country, each expressing outrage that their children are being exposed to what they see as sexually explicit entertainment. Religious leaders have been even more vocal in their opposition. Reverend Billy Graham calls Elvis's performances morally corrupting. The Catholic Church issues statements condemning rock and roll as music that appeals to the base instincts. Parent-teacher associations across the country pass resolutions demanding that television networks refuse to broadcast Elvis Presley performances. The controversy centers on something that seems almost quaint in retrospect: the way Elvis moves his hips when he performs. To teenage viewers, Elvis's gyrations are exciting, rebellious, sexually charged in a way that speaks to feelings they're only beginning to understand. To their parents, those same movements represent everything dangerous about this new music called rock and roll: a corruption of American youth, a breakdown of moral standards, a threat to the social order that has kept America stable and prosperous in the decades since World War II. Corporate sponsors are threatening to pull their advertisements. Coca-Cola, Ford Motor Company, and Procter & Gamble have all expressed concerns about being associated with programming that draws such vociferous criticism from parents. The economic pressure on CBS is enormous. The Ed Sullivan Show generates millions of dollars in advertising revenue, and losing major sponsors could devastate the network's profitability. Sullivan finds himself at the center of a cultural war he never intended to fight. The entertainment industry needs Elvis because he delivers ratings that translate directly to advertising revenue. Parents groups demand that Elvis be banned from television because his influence on children is seen as morally corrupting. Sullivan's solution, reached after days of heated discussions with CBS executives, network censors, and angry parents, is unprecedented in television history: show Elvis from the waist up only. Ladies and gentlemen, Sullivan announces to his studio audience and the 60 million Americans watching at home, here is Elvis Presley. The curtains part, and Elvis walks onto the stage wearing a black suit with white trim, his hair carefully styled, his expression carrying the confident smile of someone who knows he is about to make history. But this time, something is different. The camera operators have received explicit instructions from the control room. Under no circumstances are they to show Elvis Presley below the waist. Elvis approaches the microphone, and for the first time in his television career, his legendary hip movements will be invisible to his audience. The cameras frame him carefully, knives chest up, shoulders and face in perfect focus. But the movements that made him famous, the gyrations that drove teenage girls to hysteria and parents to fury, exist only below the camera's field of vision. The camera operators have been rehearsing this unusual assignment for hours. Director John Ray has positioned 3 cameras at strategic angles, all with explicit instructions to keep Elvis's pelvis out of frame. Camera 1 focuses on his face and shoulders. Camera 2 captures him from a 3/4 angle, cutting off just below his chest. Camera 3 provides wide shots that include his upper body, but never drop below his belt. In the CBS control room, executives watch nervously as their cameramen execute the most unusual directing challenge in television history. They are broadcasting a performer famous for his movement while deliberately hiding his most famous movements. It's like showing a dancer from the neck up or a basketball player without showing him dribble. The irony is immediate and powerful. By censoring Elvis's hips, CBS has made them more significant than they ever were before. Every viewer knows exactly what they're not being allowed to see. Every camera angle, every carefully framed shot reminds the audience that something dangerous and exciting is happening just outside their view. Elvis begins performing "Don't Be Cruel," and the effect is surreal. His voice carries the same sensual intensity, his shoulders move with obvious rhythm, his face shows the passion that has made him the most controversial performer in America. But his hips, the source of all the controversy, remain a mystery visible only to the studio audience. The teenagers in the studio audience scream with the same intensity as always because they can see Elvis's complete performance. Their reaction becomes even more significant to home viewers because it's the only indication of what's being hidden from them. Every scream, every swoon, every expression of teenage ecstasy serves as evidence that something extraordinary is happening below the camera's field of vision. In living rooms across America, family dynamics shift in real time as Elvis performs his censored set. In Akron, Ohio, the Morrison family gathers around their Zenith television set, parents Bill and Dorothy, 17-year-old daughter Susan, and 14-year-old son Tommy. Susan strains forward in her chair, trying to see what the cameras won't show. Dorothy grips her husband's arm, simultaneously relieved that her daughter can't see Elvis's controversial movements and anxious about what those movements might be doing to the teenagers in the studio audience. "Why won't they show his whole body?" Susan asks, frustrated by the restrictive camera work. "Because he moves inappropriately," Dorothy responds, though she's never actually seen Elvis perform live and can only imagine what's being hidden from view. Tommy, who is more interested in baseball than rock and roll, asks the question that cuts to the heart of the cultural moment. If his dancing is so bad, why is everyone screaming? It's a question that millions of American families are grappling with as Elvis performs his censored set. Parents who demanded the censorship now find themselves explaining to their children why certain movements are dangerous, why certain types of self-expression are inappropriate, why their teenagers' enthusiasm for Elvis represents a threat to social order. But the most significant impact of the censorship is on Elvis himself. For the first time in his career, he is performing while knowing that his audience can't see his complete performance. The spontaneity and natural movement that characterize his live shows are constrained by the knowledge that television cameras are deliberately avoiding part of his body. Elvis adapts with the instincts of a natural performer, Unable to communicate through his hip movements, he intensifies his facial expressions, uses his hands and shoulders more expressively, puts extra passion into his voice. The result is a performance that is simultaneously restricted and explosive, a tiger in a cage that somehow becomes more powerful because of its confinement. The contradiction creates an unintended effect. Elvis appears more dangerous precisely because he's being censored. Teenagers watching at home understand that they're seeing a performer so threatening to adult authority that television networks feel compelled to hide part of him. The censorship becomes a badge of authenticity, proof that Elvis represents genuine rebellion against the conformist culture of 1950s America. When Elvis finishes Don't Be Cruel and moves into Love Me Tender, the contrast between his restricted television image and his unconstrained studio performance becomes even more apparent. The studio audience can see Elvis moving with his full range of motion, but television viewers see only a talking head, albeit a talking head that radiates more sexual energy than most performers communicate with their entire bodies. During Love Me Tender, Elvis slows down his movements, focuses on the emotional content of the song rather than the physical expression. But even this gentler performance is filmed from the waist up, creating the impression that all of Elvis's performances are so dangerous that none of them can be shown in their entirety. The aftermath of the show is immediate and dramatic. CBS switchboards light up with calls from viewers, some angry that Elvis was shown at all, others angry that he was censored. The calls come from across the country, representing every possible perspective on the cultural controversy Elvis represents. "I can't believe you showed that degenerate on television," calls Mrs. Agnes O'Brien from Boston. "Even with censoring his inappropriate movements, he's still corrupting our children." "Why did you censor Elvis?" demands 16-year-old Linda Patterson from Dallas. "He's a singer, not a criminal. What you did was unfair and stupid." "Thank you for protecting our families from that immoral display," says Reverend Thomas Mitchell from Atlanta. "Though I still believe he shouldn't be on television at all." Newspaper headlines the next morning focus not on Elvis's music, but on the unprecedented decision to show only half of a performer. "Elvis cut off at the waist," reads the headline in the New York Daily News. "Television censors the king," announces the Los Angeles Times. The censorship becomes a bigger story than the performance itself. What neither CBS nor Ed Sullivan anticipate is that the controversy will make Elvis even more famous. Teenagers who might never have heard of Elvis Presley suddenly know his name because it's associated with something so dangerous that television won't show it. The censorship becomes the most effective publicity campaign in entertainment history. More significantly, the waist-up shots establish a precedent that will define the relationship between rock and roll and television for decades. Elvis's censored performance becomes the moment when television executives realize that rock and roll is not just music, but a cultural force that threatens traditional American values. Parents across America understand that they are witnessing more than a television performance. They are watching their children embrace music and movements that represent a fundamental challenge to the social order. The screaming teenage girls in Ed Sullivan's audience are not just expressing enthusiasm for a singer, they are declaring their independence from their parents' values and embracing a new form of cultural expression. The teenagers who watch Elvis's censored performance understand something equally significant. They have found a champion who threatens adult authority so much that adults feel compelled to literally hide him from view. Elvis becomes more than an entertainer. He becomes a symbol of youth rebellion, a figure who represents their generation's refusal to accept the cultural limitations imposed by their parents. Ed Sullivan, watching from the wings as Elvis completes his performance to thunderous applause from the studio audience, and unprecedented controversy from the viewing public, understands that he has participated in a cultural watershed. Television will never be the same. American families will never be the same. The relationship between parents and children will never be the same. But Sullivan also understands something else. Controversy translates to ratings, and ratings translate to revenue. Despite the angry letters, despite the pressure from parents' groups, despite the network's nervousness about sponsors, the Ed Sullivan Show has just broadcast the most watched television program in American history. 3 weeks later, Elvis will appear on the Ed Sullivan Show for the third and final time. The cameras will again show only his upper body, but by then the point will have been made. Rock and roll has conquered television, not despite censorship, but because of it. Record stores across America report unprecedented demand for Elvis recordings. Sam Goody's flagship store in New York City sells 2,000 Elvis albums on the Monday following his censored appearance, more than they typically sell in an entire month. Tower Records in Los Angeles reports similar sales spikes, with teenagers asking specifically for the singer they wouldn't show on TV. Radio stations find themselves in an impossible position. Many adult-oriented stations refuse to play Elvis's music, responding to pressure from parents and religious groups. But teenage-targeted stations can't keep up with demand for Elvis songs. Winds in New York begins playing Elvis records every hour on the hour, and their ratings among teenage listeners soar. The cultural impact extends beyond entertainment into fashion, behavior, and social attitudes. Teenage boys across America begin slicking back their hair and wearing their shirt collars turned up, imitating Elvis's style. Teenage girls adopt the screaming, swooning response they witnessed from the studio audience, making hysteria a form of cultural expression. The controversy forces American families to confront fundamental questions about censorship, artistic freedom, and generational change. Dinner table conversations across the country revolve around what families witnessed on their television screens. Parents struggle to explain why certain forms of expression are dangerous while defending their decision to allow their children to watch censored versions of those same expressions. The psychological impact on teenagers is profound and lasting. For the first time, they have witnessed adult authority acknowledging that their cultural preferences are powerful enough to be threatening. The censorship validates teenage rebellion, proving that their generation's music and heroes represent genuine alternatives to their parents' values. Elvis himself understands the historical significance of what has transpired. In interviews following the show, he expresses both frustration with the censorship and appreciation for its unintended consequences. "They tried to cut me in half," Elvis tells a reporter from Billboard magazine, "but I think it just made people more curious about the half they couldn't see." Churches across America use Elvis's television appearance as sermon material, with ministers warning their congregations about the dangers of rock and roll music. The National Congress of Parents and Teachers issues a statement condemning performers who use sexual movements to corrupt American youth. The American Legion passes a resolution calling for television networks to exercise greater responsibility in their programming choices. But these institutional responses only strengthen Elvis's appeal among teenagers. Every condemnation from adult authority figures proves to teenage audiences that Elvis represents genuine rebellion against conformist culture. The more adults condemn Elvis, the more teenagers embrace him. The evening of September 9th, 1956, will be remembered as the night television tried to contain a cultural revolution and discovered that revolution cannot be censored, only amplified. 60 million Americans tuned in, expecting to see a complete Elvis Presley performance. Instead, they witnessed the birth of the generation gap, the moment when American youth culture declared its independence from American adult culture. Half came to worship, half came to be scandalized. All of them witnessed the moment rock and roll officially conquered television, not by showing everything, but by proving that even when you hide the most dangerous parts of a cultural revolution, the revolution continues anyway. Sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones where you can't see everything that's happening. Sometimes censorship makes the censored person more important than any publicity campaign could. Sometimes trying to hide a cultural movement is the best way to ensure that everyone notices it. On September 9, 1956, CBS television tried to show half of Elvis Presley and accidentally showed America a complete cultural transformation.